What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we are going to be talking about the fall of the Buccaneers. This is going to be a roster breakdown, a draft class breakdown, as well as a records prediction. So stay tuned. We're going to be breaking it all down and talking about a whole lot of fun stuff. Let's get right into this. If you are new, look at that link tree. It's a great way to get involved with every single part of the community, including looking at Twitter, where I talk about stuff all the time, including posting all 22. Going on Instagram even, I'm starting to post there a lot more. That's the more personal side of me, so feel free to go check that out. And then, again, it's always cool to interact over there. But then I have my sponsors in there as well. You literally click those links and they bring you to whatever site you want to go to, either Olipop or else UnderDog Fantasy. The GOATs, I love them to death. I literally have a flag sitting on the ground, which I continue saying I'm going to hang up, but you know what, the procrastinator myself has not done so. Let's get right into this though. But yeah, if you guys want to use UnderDog, they have plenty of sports. It's not just football, including UFC. They just did for, I think, 303. They had some certain specials for new people, but feel free to hop in, use that code. 50% discount or 50% match. So they give you free cash, 50% of what you deposit, over $10 up to $250. So you get to do that. Sends me a $60 check. So transparency always does help. I actually technically made more from UnderDog last month rather than YouTube. So love you guys for that. Let's get right into this though. Talking about the draft class. So the draft class, honestly, overall, solid. I'm a tough grader. B-, really solid. But let's go, pick by pick. Start out with Graham Barton. I wasn't the biggest Graham Barton guy, but this was the one spot I really wanted him to go. I love it. Once you guys brought in Sua Opeta over the offseason, I was very, very much on board with this. It seemed like it was the perfect vision of someone who's a guard center hybrid. And technically Graham Barton was a left tackle, but for me, it did scream that this was their vision for what they wanted on the interior of the offensive line, and they did it. So I love that for them. At round number 2, pick 57, you guys went Chris Braswell. I thought that was a bit early. I'm not against Chris Braswell at all. I think he's a developmental edge rusher. I think he's not bad. But at 57, there were some other edge rushers I was a bigger fan of. I'll put it that way. And there were some that even slid to the 5th round, like Xavier Thomas, that I had higher than Chris Braswell. But again, I was more of an Xavier Thomas fan than saying that's the consensus. Bottom line, I didn't think it was a bad pick at all. It was just something that was more underwhelming because I wanted an edge one. And, you don't really get that with Chris Braswell. He never was an edge one. He's going to be someone who's just a consistent contributor. Is basically setting yourselves up for the future again. And for a team that might be trying to maximize Mike Evans' last years, I'm not a huge fan of basically laying a foundation when you still are relatively competitive. But again, that's my take overall. Tyke Smith, as well as Jalen McMillan, were your 3rd round picks. Tyke Smith is a very, very solid player. He's very experienced. Pretty sure he was from West Virginia as well before Georgia. So 2 schools that know how the hell to train up their safeties. Definitely a good DB school. And, he's just somebody who's relatively consistent, very athletic in terms of his overall testing. This is probably the range where I thought I was comfortable with him. So good value. Jalen McMillan, honestly, nice receiver who's just going to be a complimentary receiver in your receiving core, but he never seemed to ever have an ego. He worked his ass off every play. He's a good pick. He's a really good receiver to have in that rotation. Bucky Irving was your 4th round selection. I really loved Bucky Irving. He just tested out really, really poorly, which was a surprise to me because I thought he was a lot more explosive overall than his testing suggested. But at the end of the day, Bucky Irving, the play on the field, ended up being justifiably worth it at 125. Maybe not the actual metrics though. At pick number 220, round 6, you got Elijah Klein, who I honestly didn't even hear of before the draft, and I talk about the draft every single day. So interesting, but again, there were a lot of other offensive linemen that I thought even got taken in the 7th round, like Matt Lee from Miami, that were far superior and, sometimes far superior to some of the offensive linemen that were taken earlier. Then you got Devin Culp as your final pick, 246, tight end / receiver out of Washington. He was like one of the most athletic tight ends there, as he should have been. He's sub 240, but, overall, I love the fact that you get to pair him up with Jalen McMillan. In the preseason, we might be able to see these guys show off a little bit more of that chemistry than some other receiving cores. Let's talk about the offense, though. And I will be saying the overall grade is a C+, but this was a great tip by one of my subs, but I'm going to give you guys kind of a floor and a ceiling, similar to what I do with the records prediction. So I'll give you the overall grade, but you have to watch the video and listen to it to be able to understand, where I lean in terms of the spread. Like maybe I'm optimistic, maybe I'm pessimistic. We'll see. But starting out with the offensive line, well, wait, no, I do this the other way. I start with the skill positions, go to the offensive line, then for defense, I go from the defensive line out to the skill positions. Starting out with the quarterback, we got Baker Mayfield. And Baker, people used to say I used to look like him. Right now, probably not so much, but, who gives a damn? But, for me, I'm obviously a huge fan of Baker Mayfield. It was actually the first draft I listened to live. I was sitting, I believe, outside of an Indian restaurant. I was waiting for it to go, and I had ESPN radio on. It was literally the first draft I was listening to on my own. So it was obviously, that was the first overall pick that I was just actually sitting waiting for. But Baker Mayfield's had an up and down career. He's been doing a much better job, but without Canales, I just don't know if Baker's going to be as effective. And this is an NFL that is getting better every single year. Like, college kids are becoming more and more pro ready. And if you are not improving by leaps and bounds, you are almost, if you think about it like inflation wise, if you're not actually earning as much as inflation, you are actually losing money. It's not saying that Baker's getting worse, but maybe he's not getting better at the rate that you need him to remain as playoff competitive as what you think. But again, there's a records portion of the video for that. Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker, running back core, not bad at all. Honestly, I like that crew. It's not going to be something where it's not going to be a crew that I'm going to say is the top end of the NFL. But honestly, you have your home run hitting threat, in my opinion, Sean Tucker. I mean, I think he fell because of a heart condition, but he's a really good back. You have your one cut back in Bucky Irving, and I think you have your 3 down back in terms of being a balanced back there in Rachaad White. Like, it's a good core. It's not going to be, again, somebody that should not be in an RBBC, but should be leading one. It's not going to be one of those. Like, these guys are RBBC backs, running back by committee. But they're still really solid backs, good contributors. Now, looking at the receiving core, we'll start out with the tight ends because I, for some reason, always forget to talk about tight end. God only knows why. But you got Cade Otton in there. We already talked about Devin Culp as well, but essentially none of these guys are going to be top-end options. Cade Otton, to me, is probably going to be, if you rank all the tight ends who are starting, probably closer into the 30s. I like Cade Otton. I'm not mistaken. You guys can correct me on this. I thought he was from Washington as well, but my memory might be slipping on me, so they might just have a thing, the organization for Washington tight ends. But Cade Otton, not bad, but again, comparatively to the NFL, again, you gotta it's apples to apples in this game, and it's not, like, that's why I'm such a douche. Like, people think I'm a douche when it comes to how I grade, but you just gotta realize that it's not saying that a player is bad, it's a player is bad comparatively to what the talent is in the NFL. Like, when someone always says, oh, I think this player could start, it's like, oh, you think he's one of the top 32 at his position, then it's like, well, maybe not. So again, you just got to keep it through that perspective, and that's why I'm a little bit more of a tough cookie. Maybe it's why I put myself in an awful position, but at the same time, I feel like being authentic and being honest is more key than anything else. But looking at the other receivers, you got Trey Palmer. I love the fact that he's starting, but I don't really know if I'm fully sold on him as an every down starter just yet, but I still love it. I think he was 4.33 speed as well. He was a really good receiver there for Nebraska. Then Chris Godwin, I thought he was way older. I think he's 28 or 29. He's not old, but he's up on a contract year. Receivers are expensive. He just hasn't been the name brand that he was a couple of years ago, and I'm hoping that he bounces back into being a consistent every week name that we are excited for. Mike Evans literally just said, I'm ending off my career as a Buccaneer, so that's great. Got him for the next couple of years. Looking at the offensive line, Tristan Wirfs is the GOAT, but you also have to pay him. And that's probably going to be $30 million a year. I mean, Penei Sewell, if I'm not mistaken, was 28. 29, 30, who gives a damn? It's expensive. Ben Bredesen, not going to be someone who I write home about personally. You got Graham Barton in there, obviously. This is going to be from our lads. I just got to put a big asterisk there. If something's wrong, it's not me who's putting him there. I just want to pair our lads because they seem to be more connected and more understanding and better at projecting than I am. And also, to be fair, it takes off a little bit of my own liability, but at the same time, it also makes sure that there's an equal playing field for everybody to be like, for every single team to basically be judged by the same company. So it allows me to at least make more commentary rather than just focusing on pure projection. But Graham Barton projected to be the center at the moment. Cody Malik at the right guard. I honestly didn't mind that too much. He's had his struggles, but that's okay. And then Luke Gadecki, who has done a really solid job as a right tackle. And, Luke Gadecki, you should see some of these videos. He's funny on the field. He definitely likes to bully people. He has a great mentality. Some dude who I'd love to have on my team for sure. But noted some backups here. You got Sua Opeta as well as Robert Hainsey, who is, a super flexible interior offensive lineman there from Notre Dame. Pretty sure he even played, games at left and right tackle. I remember he had 5-position versatility, which I love because if an injury pops up, it's always nice to have someone who has experience at that position when you're facing against guys who basically play every single down at a certain position. So let's go on here. Oh, I forgot about it. So let's talk about the range, right? Overall grade I have it as C+. If Baker Mayfield can remain the same, if essentially Chris Godwin could, be himself and, maybe get back to where he was, there's not really many holes on this roster. Again, tight end's not going to be something that holds me back. And you have a good RBBC. I can see this being a B- ceiling. Like, again, it's not anything where I'm going to be overly shocked. Like, it's a good receiving core as it is. Like, there's not much wiggle room for me except for Baker. And maybe if Cade Otton could take a big step up, maybe you can push it to a B. But, I feel like I know for a fact the guys who I have faith in are the guys that could be improving a little bit, and I'm already kind of inching towards the improvement. Floor-wise, if Mike Evans continues to look old, you instantly lose a pretty strong boundary threat. If you have issues with Tristan Wirfs in terms of a contract, God forbid, I'm not going to use that as something that could lower the score, but, there's certainly that aspect as well. If the running RBBC just proves to be literally the 32nd best, it's easily capable of being a C, if not a C-, if not a D+. It's really dependent on Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield's regression without Canales. So I'm going to be more optimistic than not. Let's talk about the defense, though. So let's go defensive line out. Logan Hall, not a fan. Never was. Gave that pick, I think, a C-. I remember I was working at a pizza joint as a server during that second day of the draft. That broke my soul. I wasn't able to get it off. But at the same time, it was, we make like $4 from these streams anyway. So it's not like, I ended up really losing out monetarily, but I do like to have that live experience with you guys. And this past year with Broshmo, that was an unbelievable stream. Those 3 days were absolutely awesome. You can watch back every single minute of it because it's up on the channel. But Vita Vea is the GOAT. I'm a super huge fan of Vita Vea. Again, asterisk here in case you didn't hear it earlier. This is projected by our lads. Why I do that is take a little bit of the liability off myself to be able to focus more on the analysis rather than the projection. But more importantly, it makes sure that everything is on a level playing field. So, they use the same logic essentially for their projection. I'd rather, do analysis based on that. And if anything's changed, please feel free to write down in the comment section about it. I always say this, you can be a douche, just don't be a douche about it. I'm more than happy to learn. I'm more than happy to make good content for y'all. And, if I could improve my analysis by, you guys who are a fan of one team being able to point out something for me who is essentially having to be a fan of 32, it makes my job so much easier. And it makes the job so much more fun when I get to converse with you and get to learn. So, again, feel free to put your comments down below. But this is the projected lineup right now. But Vita Vea is a freaking monster. Kalijah Cansey, I was not a fan of the pick at the time, not because I didn't like Kalijah. I think he's great. But I thought it was like, this is kind of a win-now move. You had the opportunity to go after Will Levis. Like, there were, based on the positioning of your roster, I didn't think you could make a playoff push, like a deep playoff push, but I certainly didn't believe you could make the Super Bowl. And, my lens, like that I look through, it basically is, can I win a Super Bowl? If I can't, then I need to be retooling to where I have the ceiling of winning a Super Bowl. I don't think the ceiling of making a small playoff push, which I think you hit your ceiling last year, is that's not where I end up taking lower value positions. Even if it's a great player, like Elijah Cansey is going to be an asset on your roster for the next 10 years. He's a really good player. But when I did see difference makers, it does make me kind of take a second look. But it's not a bad pick at all. He's a great player. I knew he was going to be great. When you pair him up with Vita Vea, that's just a nasty 1-2 punch that complements each other perfectly. They're fantastic. Then you got the edge rushing crew. I'm not a fan of this edge rushing crew. I actually really like Yaya Diaby, so keep that in mind. And Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. But we're talking about starting edge rushers here. Got to remember Chris Braswell as well. You have a good rotation of guys, right? A good rotation of guys. I think Jose Ramirez is cut since I made these slides, but we'll just have that be there as a F to pay respects moment. Regardless, I really love Jose Ramirez, but we'll just have him on there. Regardless, you have a good rotation of guys. The problem is the NFL requires you to have an actual edge one now to be relatively successful, or at least to have a legitimate chance to make a Super Bowl run. You need to have an edge one. Like, there needs to be somebody who is a marquee edge defender who is known to be a bona fide guy to game plan around, right? None of the guys on your roster have that right now. And I hope that I'm proven wrong because I love Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. It's a contract year. He could end up taking a big step up. Or Yaya Diaby's a beast. I loved him at Louisville. But it's just the chances are so much lower than what I'd like to say. But, again, that's going to be where I saw the most regression is the confidence I have in, Logan Hall as well as the edge rushing crew. Looking at those linebackers, KJ Britt, he was able to beat out, I keep wanting to call him Devin Lloyd, but Eagles linebacker that I don't know why I'm slipping up, Devin White. He was able to beat up on him and be able to beat his spot to be able to take the starting role. I don't think he's like awe-inspiring, but I liked him there. I'm pretty sure he was at Auburn. Then Levante David, really good veteran there. Again, he's not the youngest. He's not a spring chicken there. But, again, there's bigger issues. There's bigger fish to fry. Looking at the safety core, Antoine Winfield Jr. is the GOAT. Just got a brand new contract. He's really, really, really damn good. So, luckily, you got both the guy on the line of scrimmage who arguably is an MVP as well as the guy in the back. So, just kind of overall, it's nice to have a good balance between secondary and defensive line in terms of top end talent. You have two guys who are like really good MVP candidates for your squad. Then you got Jordan Whitehead. I'm not against Jordan Whitehead. He's a relatively solid safety. I mean, he's been on rosters for a long time. It's not like he's a bum at all. And if he were, I would have put him as probably the worst of the units, right? So definitely not going to shit on him remotely. He's a good player. And then you got Tyke Smith. He's that heir apparent at the nickel. A nice young contract right there as well. You got Zay McCollum, who I was noted as saying is the steal of the draft. So I really do have faith in him. Otherwise, we'll talk about it in a second when it comes to the range, but you could be in trouble if he doesn't take the big step up. And then Jamel Dean, who I really, really did like as well. So I said overall it's a B. Again, there's not actual legitimate massive holes apart from maybe Logan Hall, in my opinion. But, at the same time, we're talking about a legitimate regression from a defense that was really stout last year. But, I do think that's much closer to the ceiling of this defense. I don't see it very likely that these edge rushers take the step up to being a quality, legit starter. I think it will be just a group of really, adequate rotational guys. I think the linebacking core is not getting any better than last year. Safety core, Antoine Winfield Jr. is going to be your last hope. But the corner core as well, you're betting a lot on Zay McCollum. You are. So I do think the ceiling is a B. I'm putting my faith that you hit your ceiling. But the floor is that Zay McCollum can't end up being the every down starter that you want. That age really starts to set in, let's just say, for Levante David. And overall, it might not be a bad defense. I think my floor would be a C+. But, there are legitimate concerns that could basically be, where you're oscillating between this line of winning and losing. It could push you just below that. So we're going to be jumping right into the records predictions here because you know what? that's what we also do in this series. So let's get right into that. This is going to be a fun one. Obviously, we already have everything that we've done before. This is cumulative, which is why you guys should be watching those other videos as well. Not only because it's a smart strategy to plug the other videos, but also because it does end up mattering into my decision making as to why maybe I did make the decision and maybe why I had an initial decision and I change my thought process the more and more I look at the rosters, which I've already done the graphics for all these, so I already have a generalized idea on exactly what I like and what I don't. However, let's get right into this. Starting out with week 1, we did have you guys beat the Washington Commanders. I really like Jaden Daniels. He's my QB2, so I do think that there is some hope for Washington. It's just the team overall isn't that good. And I give them 2-15 record. I do believe that they might end up breaking that. It's just one of those teams where it's very hard to predict where they'll upset. But, it's a team that has a really, really solid foundation. I have a lot of faith that they can end up hitting a massive growth curve and really kick some ass. Because I do think Jaden Daniels is not going to be the problem. I think he is the answer. And it might take a little bit of time. I'm just praying to God he stays healthy. The offensive line is not great. Regardless, I do think this team is ready to battle day one. I think the biggest issue is the fact that essentially all these teams are getting significantly better. And it's not that you've gotten worse. It's just you haven't gotten better, really, in my eyes. And I mean, to be fair, you guys have gotten a worse defense overall. You can't trade away a top corner and basically start losing a lot of your veteranship quality, especially at the edge rushing position, and then expect to really remain with that A- grade that you had at the start of last year. But it's still a good squad. We're at that point in the NFL, thank God, to where, there's a handful of teams that are not necessarily good, and the rest of them are very, very competitive. So let's keep that in mind. Going into week 2, the Lions are relatively a Super Bowl competitor. I mean, relatively, they boosted their one weakness last year. I still think they should probably try to go after star wide receiver, but they kick some ass. They did a really, really, really good job. They're a very talented roster, and they're going to be at home. I think they're going to make a massive push for the NFC. And you know what? We'll see what happens. But it's a really good squad. And, the one weakness I really thought they had last year was the boundary corner situation. And they've just addressed that. Speaking of Carlton Davis, they've been hammering that in. And, it's safe to say that they almost have a no-fly zone there. Week number 3, the Broncos are going to be super, super young, super developmental. I really do like Bo Nix, but there are a lot of holes in the roster, and I just don't think it's very complete. But, I mean, I don't really have to explain myself too much there. You're also going to be in Tampa Bay at that period of time. This is a spot where I will be really heavily factoring in home field advantage because it is not easy to play in Tampa. So I will definitely be factoring that in, and it will come to play in week number 4. Philadelphia is a damn good roster, and I mean a damn good roster. But at the same time, this is a team that they lost in the playoffs to. Haven't they lost to the Buccaneers twice now in the playoffs? I'm pretty sure Tom Brady was the one who whooped their ass the first time that they went to the playoffs, and then obviously last year. So I do think it's in the cards to be able to continue that trend. Looking at how the Eagles have addressed themselves, I mean, they're pretty damn stacked at that cornerback position now to a spot where I think you'd have to beat them on the ground, and I don't know if you can. Just the secondary is a little too talented at the moment to be able to win through the air unless they have James Baldberry, touching the field, which he shouldn't. But I do think that this is a matchup to where the Eagles are trying to win now. Moves like Saquon Barkley and obviously getting multiple corners. Like those are filling gaps to essentially make yourself more ready at the moment, which to be fair, the Eagles did the right thing because they boosted themselves in the long run too. But, after going multiple DBs, which is what they needed to do in terms of being able to fill the gaps now, like they're loading up. And I don't think Pennsylvania is much more fun to play in than Tampa when you're in the middle of this absolute muggy ass season. But I do think this is a game that could end up once again going Tampa Bay's favor. Week number 5, you are going to Atlanta to be able to face the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons are going to be a good squad. Very underrated team. They have a really good run game. They have a very high level offensive line. They have untapped potential in their receiving core. And their defense is very underrated as well. And I do think this is going to be a really good clash. It's on Thursday night. I do think that Kirk Cousins is potentially going to, fade underneath the bright lights, but I just don't know if I have full faith in the fact that this defensive line, apart from obviously the two guys in the middle, Vita Vea as well as Kalijah Cansey, can make a difference. And I don't know if Kirk Cousins is going to push the field enough to really have Antoine Winfield be the difference maker. And then on offense, I do think the Falcons are developing their defensive line respectively, unfortunately at a faster rate than the Buccaneers are developing theirs. To be fair, it only matters for this night right here. I do think the home field advantage will give Atlanta the nod there. They're just simply a better team. Week number 6, you are going to be coming off a mini bye Thursday to Sunday. And you're going to the Saints. I was about to say to Atlanta for some reason again, but to New Orleans to be able to face the Saints. And the Saints are an underrated squad too. It's not like they're awe-inspiring. Like, I'll make that clear. But they are a team that is actually doing everything they can to improve right now. And I do appreciate it. I mean, if you look at their first 2 picks, they were both filling, win now moves as well. I mean, to be fair, they needed offensive tackle desperately, but you're moving a right tackle to left. That's just basically saying they were trying to go after the best offensive lineman rather than trying to maybe go with what maybe they, to be fair, they're going to need both left and right tackle. So we'll see what Talifuaga ends up doing. But then they got Kool-Aid McKinstry as well. They just went BPA, and that's a smart move for an organization that is relatively lackluster. Being off the mini bye is sick, but I do think that the Saints, with a little bit more of the ground and pound, maybe to the outside, I do think they could end up being, the favorites in this one. And I mean, again, the Buccaneers could be stealing this. They got that mini bye right there. I would not doubt it if this ended up being the game where the Buccaneers take hold, but I'm going to give the nod to the Saints there. Week number 7, the Baltimore Ravens go to town, and it's a Monday night game. You guys are playing actually some pretty significant games already. So with that being said, this is a game where, again, I could totally see Baltimore randomly slipping up on a Monday night, but I'm going to give this game to the Ravens. They are just far superior. They are every year. They're a regular season juggernaut, so I'm not going to dissuade myself from going and leaning on the past to allow me to project to the future. Week number 8, Atlanta goes to Tampa Bay, and I'm actually going to go and give this one to y'all. We'll have this one be a nice little splitzer-rooney here. It will not be primetime, so I guess Kirk Cousins has his best chance, but again, you're going from playing in a dome to basically being out in the elements, and especially in the middle of the day. I know you guys might think that it's not a big deal, but if any of y'all have actually played on AstroTurf as well, especially if you played the game of football, I mean, that could be a big difference maker. You have your essentially air-conditioned dome versus, you're out in the Tampa Bay elements, middle of the day, the UV's at its highest, and the Buccaneers players are built for combat in that, while the Atlanta Falcons are going to have to be a little bit more cognizant of it. But at week number 9, they go to Arrowhead, and it's another primetime game. I mean, you guys have a pretty good slate of them here. I will be giving this one to the Chiefs. Pat Mahomes steps up in prime time, and even if he doesn't, he has some ways of being able to rebound in the game. That's why he is arguably, if not the greatest player of all time in the NFL, or maybe the best, not the greatest. Tom Brady, I mean, you can debate. It's honestly a good debate as to how good Patrick Mahomes is comparatively to Tom Brady, because this early in his career, we're essentially projecting that he's going to be relatively as effective as time goes on, which is a bet that's not a bad one. But regardless, Kansas City is still going to be a very, very talented team. When the bright lights are on, Pat Mahomes seems to answer the call. Week number 10, you're going up against a fully rested San Francisco 49ers. I mean, I don't give a damn where you are. you could be on the planet Mars, and I would still give it to San Francisco. I mean, if San Francisco had to wear essentially oxygen tanks during this game, and you guys somehow had some like crazy breathing ability, I would still give it to the Niners. It's just they're far superior of a roster, going to be on a full bye week as well. It's going to be a relative shit show, to be blunt. And then we have the matchup of the bye weeks right here. Week number 12, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against, and they're going to East Rutherford, New Jersey to play the Giants. And I'll not sugarcoat this. This is not a great game. Like, it's not going to be an exciting one. Relatively, again, underwhelming comparatively to other rosters with the Buccaneers, to relatively underwhelming because of a bum of a quarterback. We'll just leave it like that in Daniel Jones. But at the same time, I do think New York is possibly coached a little better as well. You got to give them that home field advantage coming off the bye week. I think that cancels out. But I'm going to go with the home field advantage there. So we're going to be going with New York winning that game. Week 13, in-division rivalry right here between, where Canales was and where Canales is there with the Carolina Panthers. So, I mean, Bryce, I do have a lot of faith in. And Canales was able to resurrect Baker. He was able to resurrect Geno. And I do think that when they're on the home field advantage, he has a little bit more of a chip on his shoulder. Going to give that one to the Carolina Panthers. Week 14, I have the Raiders going to y'all's home turf and losing. That's a game, honestly, the Raiders, I will go on record as saying that this is the one team I feel the worst about in terms of putting them low, because they have an adequate quarterback. I said no quarterback. They have an adequate quarterback with a really good defense, with a defensive head coach. Usually, as a Steelers fan, I know this especially, that does end up leading to wins when you don't fully expect them. Week 15, we have the Buccaneers going to the Los Angeles Chargers. I think that home field advantage does matter. LA, I do think, is going to be a little bit more ground and pound. And, their running back core, not bad. It's not good. Let me put it that way. It's not great. But I do think that Los Angeles is a bit underrated at the moment. To be fair, I have them at 4-1 already. I mean, Jesus, they got to lose some games in here, but I don't think it's going to be to y'all. To be fair, 4 of those 6 games are in division. So, I mean, we're talking about 2 of the lower teams. So we're pretty much probably going to be giving LA a little bit more of a hard time there, but LA will be winning at home. I think same thing with Dallas. Dallas is a juggernaut of a squad, and they're not going to be as elite as maybe I want to give them credit for, but they do have pretty much the foundational pieces in place that you need in a top corner, good edge rushing crew, a solid quarterback, especially on the last weeks of his deal. Kind of a big deal. Week number 17, Panthers go to, you're going down to Tampa. I think that the right thing to do is to give this one a nice little splitzer-rooney. And my biased self says I should give this both to the Panthers. I am not going to do that. I don't think you guys are, in quotes, hopeless, so to speak. So I really do like what you guys can do there. And then you face the Saints at home in Week 18. I do think the Saints are a team I could end up seeing sweeping, but I will be going with my gut here and saying you finish off the season strong. So you might have fallen a little bit from grace, but you have a tough-ass schedule. I mean, we're talking about teams that were in the championship games here, like Lions. You got the Eagles who are making a push. Obviously, you guys ended that push. But you have a lot of contenders on your schedule, and you still pull out 6 wins, and that includes a game where you could have easily flipped the tide in 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 of these. So floor-wise, I do think that, you could end up probably losing 2. I mean, like looking at the games, I could see, because I'm doing the floor and the ceiling now. Basically, I could see Week 14 being a loss, and maybe I could see Week 17 or 18. So I'll give that 2 right there. Maybe even Week 1 as well. But I'm going to go with 4, and I'm trying to do math now. 4 and 13. The funny thing is I'm an analytics major. 4 and 13 is your floor. I'm going to go with 6 and 11 as your actual record. And ceiling-wise, I mean, do I have any that I could pull here? Probably 1 right there. 2. Could I say 3? I think I could say 3. So I'm gonna say 9-7 as the ceiling, which is, or is it 9-8 now? Dude, I can't do math for the life of me. I believe it's 9-8. So that's going to be it, though. That's sick. I mean, hey, you guys end up actually having a really solid record. I have it balanced in between those two. The fact is, you have a respectable season going in, being this low, and that's really indicative of what the NFL has become. The teams that even are in this range, there is almost a tier jump to where I feel a lot more confident about them not picking up easy wins, but actually being very competitive. For, the Raiders and the Broncos, they had some easy wins against some teams that are not necessarily that good. Versus you guys, you had a tough schedule and you still pulled out some and are able to be competitive in the majority of your games. So that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. Love y'all. See you on the far side. Peace.